and today's session is going to be on dementia, and we have got dementia expert Mel Sturman with us. She's written the Dementia Care book for the National Back Exchange, so she's going to be talking us through a lot of content today, a lot of very valuable content. We're going to be taking questions at a couple of points throughout the session, so if you've got any questions, please put them in the chat box and we'll monitor that and get as many of those answered as we can. If there are any questions that have gone unanswered, we'll make sure we follow up with you after the session. So I'll hand over to Mel and we'll crack on.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Just a little bit of background about myself. I am actually a registered nurse, and I work for Norfolk County Council and North Care, and I became involved with dementia many years ago because as a moving and handling expert, I was getting lots of phone calls regarding challenging behaviour. So did many years of work in order to obviously be able to produce a dementia care behavioural approach for moving and handling book. What I wanted to do is actually go through what is challenging behaviour. So for me, we all have our own interpretation, but for me, challenging behaviour means it's difficult for us care professionals to provide care. So the behaviour is making it difficult for us to provide support with food, support with personal care, support with moving and handling or moving with dignity transfers. We also look at, some people will say it's behaviour that challenges that the person has. So for example, I had a lady that would walk, and she expressed some challenging behaviour in terms of it was difficult for us to provide care for her eating and drinking. But it also meant that we had behaviour that challenged the organisation and impact on other people within that care home. So for example, we wanted to leave little drinks out for the lady or little finger snacks out for that lady, but obviously leaving that out and other residents walking around in that home, they could pick up the food and the drinks, obviously the infection risks and diet risks. So for me, what was interesting about all the research that led up to the book was about behaviour happens for a reason. So what is a behaviour? A behaviour is a response to a stimulus, a person, it could be another person, or it could be in health and social care, an unmet need. Okay, so for example, if I just want you to sort of think about how would you feel, especially we're going to make this sort of COVID relevant at the moment with some work that I've been doing. So how would you feel, me coming in as a stranger, excuse me, coming in to you, cover up my nose, coming up to somebody with dementia, with my gloves on as well if I was doing care, coming in with a mask. They would be quite, they may feel vulnerable. It may be a reminder of something that happened in the war. And certainly this week I went out to see a gentleman with that was expressing some challenging behaviour. With the mask, he wasn't very accepting to me. However, I decided my super duper visor to go in with this, okay? The challenges are, I'll take that off. The challenges are with the visor as well, we do have the communication, the sound is going within the visor and actually coming towards the person. So that actually is a trigger, and that's going to make communication much more difficult. Certainly within my organisation, we are asked to use a mask as well as a visor, but actually I have obviously been given this week clearance for me to do my own risk assessment with regard to working with challenging behaviour, because I said the visor, the gentleman in question, I was able to sit with him. He obviously held my hand. There's obviously mixed views about whether that's appropriate or not, but that's what he wanted. And we were able to engage with looking through his photo album, talking about his wife before we even went to the moving and handling transfer. So just think about the impact, especially with COVID at the moment, the impact on PPE to somebody with dementia. What I'm also seeing is people with vascular style dementia. So we've actually had some people that have had some strokes at the beginning of COVID, which has now obviously started to affect vascularly, and actually they're not understanding what COVID is about. So you do need to really sort of think about what we're doing for those individuals. So for me, what are the triggers in moving and handling? It's never an exhaustive list. We look at physical things that are happening. So they may be hitting the person, may be hitting you, they may be grabbing you, they may be pushing somebody. But don't actually think about that it could be that they're not wanting to comply. It could actually be their form of communication. If they're struggling to speak, struggling to converse, grabbing somebody or reaching out for somebody may be not challenging behaviour. It may be that they're just wanting to express that they have an unmet need. We also look at non-verbal, and a great one I get is staff saying to me, oh, we can't use the stand aid on somebody. And again, this gentleman I only saw this week, it was a huge, great stand aid. I haven't seen one like it for a while. And actually it came, the staff were bringing it to him, and instantly his body posture was retracting away from it. He really was scared. Another one is about when staff are saying to me, oh, I need to move Mildred at a specific time of day. But actually when I go and see Mildred, for example, she's sitting in the chair, eyes are closed, and she's not wanting to engage. So actually for her, is it actually the right time that she wants to be moved? That's her way of saying, leave me alone, I don't want to be moved. So you need to think, is it necessary to move that person at that specific time? We get loads of verbal communications and expressions with, I don't use the word shouting, I use raised voices. It could be language, and language is interesting. I've got a couple of case scenarios. One of them is about a lady where we're now seeing that they were understanding English, but actually they've now reverted, as part of their dementia process, reverted back to their native language. So the verbal side of things can be quite a challenge for us as well. So what are unmet needs in health and social care? So the most common ones that I see are poor pain management. So I actually had an individual that had a hip operation, and pain management was paracetamol. But they weren't able to converse that. And actually the first thing I went to see, the lady was in bed, and the staff were saying, we can't hoist this lady. And the first thing, she was a retired nurse, so that was fantastic for me. And that's important, that you actually build up a picture of that individual before you go in. So what are their life experiences? What is their occupation? Find out a bit more. So actually I found out she was a nurse in Norwich. So we actually had a chat about the old hospital in Norwich. And then she said to me, my legs hurt. I said, okay. But we talked about pain management with the staff. And this lady really drove into me. She actually said, I don't like asking the staff for pain management. She said, I don't want to be a nuisance. So actually we went away, we looked at the pain management plan. When I came back, they had put on a patch. When I came back, the lady was totally different. Her pain, the patch is not so intrusive. She wasn't having to feel that she needed to ask for anything. She wasn't feeling that she was disturbing the staff. And actually we were able to do a really good hoisting transfer out of bed. Fantastic, it's what we want. The other thing could be about thirst. Another one I heard was a lady that she wasn't able to tell me that she was thirsty, but she used to just repetitively stick her tongue out. She was just constantly sticking her tongue out. And I said, I wonder if she's thirsty. My goodness, I've never seen a lady gulp water juice down so quickly. It could also be hunger. So again, are we looking at the right diet for that individual? You know, if you served me beef or lamb, I would be mortified because I don't eat beef or lamb. So actually we need to find out what that normal person's habits are. Another one I've had was an interesting one, was a lady that needed to use the toilet. So her way of conversing that she needed to use the toilet or wanted her pad changed was simply lifting her dress up. She would lift her dress up at the front, and then she would walk around the care home. And it was only just through trial and error of doing some behavioural tracking that we were able to work out what this person was trying to communicate to us. So we look at responses to individuals. I'm 50 next month, so actually it's not a problem for me. But when I was 21 and just graduated as a nurse, I always remember this. I was on a night shift, I was in charge of the ward, and a patient said to me, why don't you go and get someone that's older that knows what they're doing? Which was a bit tricky because there wasn't anyone older that knew what they were doing, and I didn't know what I was doing. But actually now, being an older person, I don't have that issue. So sometimes we've got a lot of very young staff coming through, and I did pick that up earlier this week. Very young carer, and he was constantly go away, very difficult. We also have racial issues as well, and we also have gender issues as well. So one of the things we try and move away from is saying that a woman might not want a male carer, and a patient might not want a male carer. So we have to sort of look at that behavioural tracking, what works for those individuals as well. The other thing is about tasks, and thankfully here in Norfolk we've moved as much as possible away from this dreadful term to hourly terms, and I work really closely with my nursing colleagues as well. So we looked at, so certainly for pressure care management, why do we need to have repetitive? So what is the turning regime for? So if it's for pressure care management and we have some challenge behaviour, I know I'm a bit waspy this morning because I've been woken up the last 2 nights by naughty neighbours, but actually that makes an impact on how I feel. So could you imagine how you would feel being woken up every 2 hours, every 4 hours at night? The first thing you might want to do is get out, you know, especially if you're creeping in the room with masks on and PPE at the moment. That could be quite frightening. So for me, for 2 hourly turns, we've looked at different equipment, so lateral turning mattresses, for example, and that deals with the challenge behaviour. We also look at pad changes as well. So actually, how frequent do we need to change the pads? And actually look at the continence side of things. So for example, if somebody is not needing to be turned so regularly, let's look at a pad that actually manages the continence needs at night. We get a huge issue about change of movement, and I've had huge successes with the Bendelet, also with bed rails. Bed rails is a controversial subject, but sometimes I'll just put bed rails in to support the movement and handling, so that the person that's being turned is not grabbing me, not grabbing my staff. So actually having the rail, or we've got some cushions, some posture cushions here we can look at. They can focus on the hands going onto the rail, not to use as a grab to assist, but just literally there to support. We would look at that. We look at things like hoisting as well. Hoisting is a big issue, and certainly some of the things I've looked at with hoisting is the sling fabric, for example. Is it the appropriate sling? And I have to say I'm very sort of careful about things like access toilet slings. You think about the material, thin bit of material here and a thin bit of material supporting under the legs. They're uncomfortable for me. So for agility and weaker bones, actually that's going to cause some pain. So we look at different sling fabrics. We've also looked at spreader bars, and I know Felgains will they distribute the Robin Care hoist. Fantastic hoist. Unfortunately, I haven't got it here to show you, but the spreader bar, actually you don't have a spreader bar, you just have 2 tapes that come down, so there is nothing occluding that person's face at all. Fantastic. We also look at things like environment. So is it a noisy environment? So like a ward environment, that could be a huge trigger for people with dementia. It could be, I've had an individual, we had to search for a silent motor for their pressure mattress, for their dynamic mattress. What would happen as soon as the alarm would go off on their dynamic mattress, they would get out of bed and hide underneath the bed. And then what we found was it was reminding him of noise, something during the war. We look at lighting. So lighting, for example, instead of going from overhead lighting, which can create shadows, we go to low level lighting so it can create still reduction of shadows. We look at temperature, so are they too cold, too hot? Now, before we move into the practicals, for us OTs and clinical people, I used to rush in and go and do an assessment really quickly. What I now do is make sure that the homes, or if it's an individual's own home I'm going to, let's do some behavioural tracking first. It will make a huge difference to your assessment. So the behavioural tracking could be, you could use a simple ABC chart, which is antecedents, so what is the task, what is the behaviour that's happening, and then the consequence. I'm more than happy to share you what I use, which is the 5 whys, because it actually gives you a little bit more information. So the 5 whys is when, as in the time and the day, when is this behaviour happening, and where. Is it in the person's bedroom? Is it in a communal area? Is it in the bathroom? What is the person doing? So is it a personal care activity, or is it and what is their behaviour? So are they grabbing? Are they verbally expressing? The why, so the task, we're looking at what is the task that we're doing, and then the final what is what intervention that we can put in place to try. And certainly with my students, we give them loads of interventions. So what I want to do is, looking at the 5 whys, I'm now going to talk through an example of a case study. So case study is Agnes. Agnes is in extra care housing, or housing with care that we call it in Norfolk. The referral came to me because she needed 3 staff and she was going over the recommended care hours for extra care housing. We had language barrier issues because she was Polish, and she spoke very little English before her dementia, but actually she was just not able to converse with us at all. Agnes had high tone, so she was presenting with high tone in the upper arms, and we also had lower limb high tone as well. The issue was about fitting slings. So the fitting slings we actually solved by, in her chair, using slide sheets to get the sling in place, maybe look at an in situ sling as well. But the main issue was about turning in bed. And what we have to do as clinicians, before we go through saying like straight away, I want to have this marvellous Bendelet system, you actually need to go through that process. So why did slide sheets not work? So why did slide sheets not work? If you imagine somebody with high tone, very rigid, actually as I was trying to use the slide sheet, even with 2, as we started to do the turn, she would then rock back. We just didn't have enough momentum on the pivot. We used other in-chair positioning systems, so like the sheets that can be left underneath the patient. And what happened with Agnes, we were able to do the cocoon method, for example, but it still meant that we needed 3, because we needed 2 to pull her over and then the 1 to put the wedge pillows behind her. We then went to looking at the in-bed positioning system attaching up to a gantry hoist or ceiling track hoist. Unusually, the speed of the hoist was incredibly slow. So as we were raising the hoist, spread bar, as we were turning, she would start pivoting back. And the reason being, normally we would expect to be able to raise a leg or bend a leg to help with that biomechanical turning. We weren't able to do that. So I was able to prove that all of those didn't work. I wanted that lady to remain in extra care housing until sadly she died, but we were able to keep her there. So with Reuben and we'll get on to practical.
Good stuff. The room is going to be Agnes for us.
So what we're doing here is we replaced the pillow with the long Liolet tube. Sorry. We chose the 250 tube so that we could obviously replace it with a pillow, but also what we wanted to do was actually have most of the wet tube on one side and a small part of the tube on the side being turned to. whilst I appreciate that with high tone here, she was unable to hold on to the tube, some people that are reaching and grabbing out, that would be a really good tactile stimulus for them.
So this is the lilac pad height, and that's going to take the weight of his top leg as he comes over onto the side. And also, because of the high tone in the limbs, the lilac pad low, we're going to put in between his knees just to take the pressure off between the bony prominences there. So, we ready to go?
Mm-hmm. So on the ventilator, you've got 3 speeds, haven't you?
Yeah.
And we tried the different speeds, and we found that I always sort of make a bit of camaraderie and moving and handling training. I said, we've got the tractor speed, as we have in plenty of tractors in Norfolk, or the Formula 1, as I'm a Formula 1 fan, so we actually went on the Formula 1. Okay.
Yep. So we'll keep it on the top speed, the Formula 1 speed, and we'll.
So what you can see here, normally we would raise a leg, put a leg on a pillow, but actually the ventilator is doing the work. Ventilator's doing the work. The leg has naturally gone over. Okay. There might be some criticisms about that Agnes, or in this case Ruben's, lying on his shoulder. But unfortunately with her, we didn't actually have any choice. We were unable to abduct the shoulder. So how did we work out, when we have a language barrier, how did we work out which was comfortable and which was not? So we did try and get an interpreter in place, but we obviously didn't on the day of assessments. We had to sort of look. But actually we looked at voice crescendo, the vocabulary, the frequency, the pitch of it. And actually we found that turning her very quickly, we wouldn't normally put speed and dementia together, turning her very quickly, or turning Ruben as quickly, actually was less stress for her. So as you can see, we've got the pad high, pad low,
yep.
In between the legs, and actually we've got, I would say, fairly comfortable position. He's acknowledging. So you can see that the tube is there, so we're not getting any entrapment, and also the tube has provided some additional support behind. And the other good thing is that if we wanted to, we could obviously put that the bed rail up on this side, and then if we were doing personal care on Harvey's side, we would then lower the bed rail down so that people didn't obviously have to lean over the top. And the beauty of the system, we were able to move, beauty of the ventilators, we were able to move Agnes to and from the care situation. So what we would need to do is we were now going to allow gravity to do a lot of the work. So if we wanted to put you on your back, we're allowing gravity to do work, and naturally that we didn't have to do a lot of hands-on. As much as gentle as a nurse I am, any hands-on could also be a trigger. So if you imagine you have a painful joint through high tone as well, and I'm grabbing hold of you, actually this is less intrusive for that and comfort for that person. Thank you very much.
Very good. Should we crack on the next scenario?
Yeah. So the next scenario is about looking at retrieval of the fallen person in the community. We get quite a few calls now regarding repetitive fallers or repetitive people found on the floor, unwitnessed falls. I've had a couple of clients where we couldn't, even with health, investigating why that person may present themselves on the floor, we haven't come up with anything conclusive. Some individuals refuse, don't want to obviously go into residential care, they don't want to be separated from a loved one, totally get that. In Norfolk, we do have what we call the Swifts and night owls, but they are there for what we would focus on unplanned needs. For me as a falls specialist as well, I would actually say that somebody repetitively found on a floor, every time the carers would go in, we would actually need to look at that as more of a planned management of care. So what I would do is actually look at products. If I'm working with somebody with dementia care, as I put outlined in the dementia care book, the razor chair we found much more positive for people with dementia. There's no moving and handling, so there's no having to change directions for those individuals. It's easy for staff to set up, and actually it's something that we taught the care providers. So I had a little bit, I'm going to be a bit honest, I had a little bit of negativity from a care provider. Oh, that's not what we normally do. Oh no, we haven't got time to do that. But actually I said to them, think about it. If you're sitting there, you've done the 999 call or a Swift call, and they can't come out and see that individual for 1, 2, 3, 4 hours. Actually, surely, if I give you, we use the I Stumble chart. The I Stumble pathway is very, very clear in giving carers, family carers, as well as formal carers, when it's appropriate to support somebody up from the floor. And I'm happy to share the I Stumble if people haven't got it. And actually what we can then do is actually teach and go through, which I did with the provider, use of the razor chair. So I'll hand it back over.
Okay, so Ruben is going to have a fall for us.
So we would expect when the care staff to go in, use the I Stumble from algorithm to actually go check that it's appropriate to use the equipment.
Yep. So we've gone through I Stumble and we've found that the Ruben is safe to lift. We're going to make it comfortable with the pillow. Thank you. Then this is the razor chair here. There's 2 bags. So we're going to, this is the seat unit here. And we're going to make sure that he can bend his legs. So lift those like so. We can slip the seat unit underneath. Then in this bag here, we've got 6 different components, starting with the backrest. So what we're going to do here is put this arm across his shoulder. So that tilts the shoulder blade up, and you can slip that underneath and just click into the seat unit like so. And it will give you a tone to let you know you've got it in the right place. Exactly the same on the other side. They're identical, so you can't mix them up. This hand across the opposite shoulder, tuck it underneath.
So if you think about if somebody was confused, somebody with dementia, they're safe. That's what they want to feel. They want to feel safe. They want to feel secure. There's no leaning over to have to roll the person onto the side so they're not feeling vulnerable.
That's good. Then we've got 4 of these. Again, they're all exactly the same, so you can't mix them up or get them in the wrong hole. And so we've got lifting arms and legs.
And I know people get quite anxious about cost of equipment. You need to be quite creative and think about actually, you know, what is, if you, this particular individual 4 times a day, we would have been calling paramedics out, we would have been calling Swifts out. So actually what you need to think about, if we can build this into a normal care package, which we did, actually you are making cost savings because you're not drawing in the services from health. Very good.
So again, every time you put in these components, it makes a beep to let you know it's in the right place. So we've got an orange dot there, if you can see that. When you get the last component in, it will tell you that it's ready to lift with a slightly different tone, and that light will go green. So like so.
So again, if you had somebody with challenging behaviour and they're used to having a tactile object to hold, then we could obviously offer that to Ruben in this case. There we go. Because again, that change of movement could be a trigger. So they do get used to it eventually, but in this case, it's holding on for dear life.
So we've got a remote control here. Just pop straight out the side of the seat unit, and I'll support his head.
And actually, remote controls are interesting, again, either with hoisting or with the chair, depending on the level of cognition that person has. you know, we titled this Living Well with Dementia. Just because somebody's got dementia doesn't mean to say they can't operate the control themselves. So that's another thought.
Very good point. So once you're ready to lift, I'll just press up on the remote, support his head.
And again, you can do this in stages. You can stop, reassure the person. So if they were like panicking, we could stop now, reassure, do it again.
Yeah. So as soon as you take your finger off the button, it will stop. So as Mel says, we can stop at any stage.
Are you all right? Yeah.
It might be that they're a bit dizzy if they've been on the floor for a while and they first come up, so we get them a cup of tea or whatever. Then we can go, depending on the height or the ability of the fallen person. There we go.
And he, you know, even now, he might, in this case, Ruben, he would be safe on there, and he might be, I'm really desperate for a drink. I've been down on the floor for a few hours. So he's quite safe on there. If he's comfortable, offer him a drink and then think about the next stage. Sometimes I think we rush into doing too many things, and actually that's break that task down into units. So we've actually, the first unit is your first aid check. The second part is actually getting the equipment in. The third part is actually getting Ruben up from retrieving from the floor. And then the fourth part would be obviously transferring off the chair. But actually at any of those points, don't try and do the whole lot in one go. And I know it's easy said and done when there's pressures of time. But actually if you break it down, you are going to get much more compliance.
Very good. I can see a few questions coming in. So, particularly with the dementia clients who do not want to be touched or approached at all, could you offer some helpful advice on how to deal with these clients?
Okay, so is it in relation to personal care or hoisting, or is there an example?
Yeah, it's personal care specifically. Yeah.
Okay. So I try and sort of, what I say to clinicians is about which aspect of personal care is it that they don't like. So, for example, is it the removal of the clothing? Is it actually the intimate side of personal care? One of the things I still commonly see is that the carer, not necessarily here in Norfolk, but actually the carers will just go in and sometimes just remove the whole of the duvet out of the way, for example. So actually for me, it's looking at what is the which point is triggering. So actually for me, it may be that having a wash in bed isn't normal. It's never been normal from childhood. We're always out of bed. So we can either look at, can we turn the person in bed and giving them the tactile objects to hold, things like obviously in bed positioning systems, sheet systems I've talked about, and the ventilator, for example, means that I'm not actually having to turn the person. Things about having a bed rail up, for example, so that the person can actually focus on the bed rail. So again, they feel very much safe and secure, which allows me to be able to get behind and do the personal care. Another example I have put in the dementia care book is actually why are we focusing on personal care within the bed. Actually, if we sit the person out onto, we had a discussion on Monday, onto something like a tilting space, shower chair that can be raised up and down. There are some in the market, and I think you said you can get them through here, that enables you to be able to undress the person in sitting. But also for me, it's about maximising. I hope you pick up on the key points about not disabling somebody with dementia care. My focus is very much, I've come to see you today, but let's look at what you can do. I think as a society, it's about what you can't do. Actually look at what can that person do. The other things is also about the frequency you're turning that person in bed, for example, to do intimate care. What we've used is impregnated wipes that you can just put into the water, wash the affected area, and then dry, versus what carers have done traditionally, which is wet the flannel, wet the area, then soak the flannel, then do that bit. Then 10 times they feel like they're rinsing the person off, and then drying the person off, and then dressing. So actually think about what products you're using. I hope that helps.
That's good. Thanks, Mel. What else have we got? Is there a reference for the book? Yes. So this is Mel's book. Where do we find it, Mel?
I can send the link through to Harvey, but you can, if you Google a National Back Exchange, that's the only place you can purchase it.
Fine. Okay, and the I Stumble algorithm will come around on the email afterwards, as will the link for the book. Is there any head support accessories that can be used? Presumably that's for the raise. At the moment, the answer to that question is no, but it's just for the first little bit of the lifting that you'll need to support the head. With any of these products, the razor, the Vendlet, the Lilac cushions, any of those, if you've got a specific case that you want to try with or want to discuss with any of us, there'll be contact details after this session on the screen, also on the email that comes around. So make sure you get in touch, and we'll go through those specific situations with you afterwards. Any tips for getting a person with challenging behaviour up from the ground using mobile hoist?
Okay. So again, with if I was using a mobile hoist, think about the type of hoist that you're using. So as I said, I'm sorry you haven't got a gantry version of it in the room, but you can you could look at, if there's a repetitive faller, then you might be looking at putting a gantry possibly in, like I said, the Robin in care. If not, then I would look at which hoist would go down to the floor. So have you got any examples here of hoists that would go down to the floor?
The Birdie Evo Compact.
So with the Birdie Evo Compact, does it go down and lift the person from supine, or do you need to get the person in sitting?
It will pick up from somebody that's supine, but you kind of have to lift them a tiny bit to attach the loop.
But that's really good, actually, because for me, hoisting somebody from supine completely lying flat is actually going to be a challenge. So what I might do is actually, just so I don't know if you can really see, it may be that we need to fit the sling in lying first, or we may actually try and sit the person up into the seated position and then fit the sling. What I always tend to do, and there is an example of it in the book, is actually come in at an oblique angle. So we're not coming in from the front. So we're coming in from the oblique angle from the side, which obviously creates some space we'd have, where if the person was in sitting, so they're engaging with us, we might actually have a hoist leg go behind the person and a hoist leg go underneath, if we can bend their knees underneath the knees. Again, depending on the level of dementia we have, I might give them the hand control and get them in control of the hoisting from the floor. Obviously, as we would expect from hoisting from the floor, we would recommend that you use a sling with head support.
Good. Okay. What somebody's saying, in general, they are reticent to be touched. Any tips to get someone to have a shower who's really reticent?
Okay. Again, I would explore, why are they resisting touch? Is it to do with, so I'd go through what we were saying about race, gender, age of carer. Is it a personality issue that they're not wanting to be touched? Other than that, we would look at different things like music, stimulus, tactile stimulus, and actually that they, because most of the time that people don't want to be touched is usually that fear of that person, or is it a history of being in pain? Might be pain management. A lot of the time we can obviously try, most of my resistive clients, so I've actually given them a tactile object to hold and they've been fine.
Thank you very much for everyone for joining. Have you got any other comments to make?
No,
Mel?
I just hope everyone found a snapshot of a book in 45 minutes useful.
Very good. So thank you very much, Mel, for coming. I saw on the chat there was lots of positive comments coming through, lots of thank yous. So thank you very much. We will be sending the email around very shortly on all the resources that we've mentioned, as well as a recording if you need to show your staff or anything like that. Stay in touch. There's lots more webinars coming up. It's every Friday at 10 a.m. as with this one. So thank you very much. Thanks again to Mel.
Thank you for having me.